We are going to record the meeting, and it has started recording, so if you don't wish to be on, can you switch your videos off, please? Welcome to the third in our series of Tuesday trainings for this year. We have tonight a Pathways panel presentation for you, and I will introduce John Allsop, who is going to chair the panel, and then he'll explain what's going to happen and the other people he's got with him. John is one of the two Pathways chairs for our district. John is on the UK side, Zane is on the island of Ireland side, and his job is to do things like this, to tell us about Pathways, to look at how we can improve Pathways take up within our clubs. He's a member of East Heart and Cornerstone Communicators, and he will now introduce himself and his panelists. So please help me welcome John to the floor. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Danny, for that very kind introduction. So before I start, I want to tell a little story. When I was about 30, I applied for a job that I wasn't qualified for, but I was ever so enthusiastic. And I was eventually offered this job. Now, some people might say it was a job above my pay grade. Nevertheless, I took this job on with enthusiasm to make a difference. Wind the clock forward 20 plus years, and I find myself in D71 being asked if I would chair the Pathways side for the district. And I asked, why are you picking me? And somebody said, well, it's because we know you're enthusiastic about it. I said, yes, but I don't know an awful lot about it, but your enthusiasm is infectious. That's what I was told. So this is really my opening statement to set the ground and set the expectation of me. So tonight is all about sharing ideas, the opportunity to ask questions about challenges you might face as members of Toastmasters, and hopefully by pooling all our resources, we will all come away better and better informed about Pathways. So to help me on this journey, I've asked 4 members of our district to support me from different parts of the district, so it's not one area centric. We've gone across the district to have for some help. So I'm going to introduce our panelists now and ask them just to give a brief introduction about themselves and about their enthusiasm for Pathways in 1 or 2 sentences. So I'm going to start with Paul. Paul, can you hear us?
Yes, John, I can hear you. The issue is, can you hear me?
We can't see you, Paul, but I did get a text message from you earlier saying that you were going to get your pajamas on early, so I'm quite pleased we can't see you. We're absolutely delighted to be able to hear you. So, Paul, if you'd just like to introduce yourself, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you very much, John. For everybody's information, I won't be able to work my screen throughout the entire panel discussion for reasons that would bore you all very much. I'm a member of Blarney Toastmasters Club in Cork, Ireland. It's a community club, and I joined in 2015. When I joined in 2015, I was quite impressed by the education program that Toastmasters International had. I come from 30 years or something like that as a trainer. So I had a big interest in how Toastmasters promoted education, learning. I am very pleased that Toastmasters came into the 20th century, late 20th, early 21st century, and has promoted learning via the internet. I am very experienced at using the internet for learning purposes, and I've taken to the Pathways program with alacrity. I have to say my starting point is I don't see any difficulty with it whatsoever. I think it's got much better learning resources than the previous one had. And to those people who have said to me, but look, it's clunky and difficult to use, and anyway, I'm not used to doing software, I say to them, why don't you just get the paper path? There are something like 5 of them available now. You don't come to Toastmasters in order to learn how to use a computer. That's not the purpose of you being here. Let nobody be shoving computer-aided learning down the neck of somebody who isn't already using computers and who doesn't need to use computers for their job. That's where I'm coming from into this. I've reached level 5, but I haven't yet completed it. I'm on 3 pads. I'm level 5 in. Oh yeah, I wanted to get a VC, visionary communication. Yeah. Irish people don't get the VC, but I always liked it. So thank you all very much, John, and everybody. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. My next person I want to introduce is Fiona Kearn. Please introduce yourself, Fiona.
Hi everyone, and thanks John. I'm Fiona Kearns. I've been a Toastmaster for quite some time. My Toastmaster journey started off with Dublin Toastmasters. I set up Uncensored Speakers in Dublin, that Friday night club. So you're all still welcome to go to that in person when it's there, and it's online at the moment. And when I moved to the UK, I was able to move around and set up clubs here and be part of clubs here as well. My current club is Godiva Speakers here in Leicestershire. So I'm in close proximity to Danny geographically. And on my screen, actually, I'm right beside you as well, Danny, but that's an aside. I'm a big fan of Pathways in terms of an organization has to move ahead. And when it comes to uptake of something new, I'm mainly curious about what challenges people have. I was a Pathways ambassador back the way. I'm not as far along as Paul, so I'm on level 3. So I guess I would say I've probably had maybe some challenges that other people have had as well, but I think they're all there to be overcome. And I'm just curious to know what challenges people have or what experience they have to date. I've seen the numbers that Daniel shared just on the uptake of Pathways. And I have to say, I think the uptake is actually really good. It was much better than I thought it would be. And if there's an opportunity later, I'd love to talk about the numbers if that's of interest to people, but I don't know whether it is or not. And that's me, Fiona Kearns, a roaming Toastmaster over Ireland and now the UK.
Thank you, Fiona. And the next person I'd like to introduce is Moira Orlovik. Maria, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks, John. My name is Moira Beaton. I am Area Director 21, a member of Doncaster Speakers. I joined Toastmasters 4 years ago this month. I was VPE when just after Pathways launched. So I stopped my CC and CL manual, jumped onto that, did a couple of levels to understand it, went back to the others, wish I hadn't. I would have been a bit more ahead. And then I finished my first pathway and I'm level 1 of the next one. I did team collaboration. The way I learned about it wasn't just doing the VPE role. When I became club president, the VPE and I worked very closely together. If we couldn't get something answered, we wrote to the education the education at TMI, etc. Got our questions answered long before they had the extra frequently asked questions, long before they opened up pathways to the other levels. And we did some learning that way, tried to understand it all. But luckily, because we were looking at criteria and understanding it, and we looked at that very first manual, and I've had the updated one, I started to understand. So when I chose my next pathway, visionary communication, I actually had a really good look at the upcoming projects. The core level 3 to a point, but 4 and 5, which John then mentioned it, district officer training, really does help you choose where you want to go. When I did my pathway, I blended it into my role, into my life. I fed it back at work. I applied it. I learned things by, like, for example, the motivation project, where I planned it with my VPE, agreed it, went off and did it with my team, who came up with something completely different after I'd done all that work. And so I actually applied that as AD at Area Council, where I found that spurring them on with ideas got them started, but then they ripped it apart and did what they wanted and came up with a better idea. So I was actually able to take learning, but it's just the 360 feedback was amazing. It really made me think about my 6-month role, which was the year of president, but the last 6 months. But I was able to actually have a look at where my weak areas were, where my strong areas were that I didn't recognize, and really started to think about where I wanted to go. It absolutely blew my mind. I could tell you about some of the other projects and how we're trying to engage people to think that way. And I've seen, and I've sent a video to John and the other panel team about somebody who was very anti-Pathways, had a DTM, had been in Toastmasters for years, and how they found that same thing. If you blend it into your life, if you look ahead at those projects, no one sets the criteria of that speech, but how do you get that criteria to turn into something else, not something regimental the way you read it, and blend it into your life? It's absolutely fantastic. I'm honestly, Pathways Champion was my email address at the time, and I still use it because I do champion Pathways, not because I'm an expert.
Thank you, Maria. That's great. And Maria, you might just remind everybody which is your home club?
Doncaster Speakers.
Doncaster Speakers.
I work with the 4 clubs there, and so we share some
in the
of
area. Brilliant. And finally, but not least, Moira Beaton.
Hello, everyone. I'm Moira Beaton, and I am from Division S. So I'm the Scottish contingent tonight. And I joined Toastmasters in 2004, and it was Fiona's husband, Kevin Lee, who got me involved in it. He used to go off to this strange thing called Toastmasters. And I said to him one day, because we worked together, what is this all about? So he took me along, and it was to Glasgow Toastmasters. And there was such a friendly bunch that I went back again, and then I went back again, and I stayed. Then I moved to Edinburgh, and I joined, well, actually, I set up Waverley. I joined Capital Communicators, and I set up Waverley Communicators. And then I, a few years ago, set up Edinburgh Advanced Toastmasters. So I'm a member of Edinburgh Advanced and Waverley Communicators. I was a Pathways guide. I got my DTM in 2011, and unlike some people, I didn't go right back to the beginning and, you know, start from the beginning again to get a second DTM. I thought, oh, what's the point of that? But what I did was I was going through all the advanced manuals because I thought, oh, this is exciting. I can do technical presentations if I want. So I was working my way through the manuals, and I thought, at one point, I'm going to have gone through all of them. What do I do next? And I volunteered to become a Pathways guide. And I had to go around with a Pathways ambassador. I had to go around 8 clubs in Scotland and give PowerPoint presentations to try and persuade them that Pathways was a good thing. They weren't all convinced. There was a lot of resistance, especially from some of the members who had been in Toastmasters for 20 plus years. So it was quite a hard sell. But I persevered, and we got so much training as Pathways guides. And we had a manual this thick, if you can imagine that online. And there were recordings, and there were webinars and all sorts, and people were just sending in their questions. So they amassed these questions and answers in this manual, which actually I still have. So there was a lot of training to train us in Pathways, but still there was a lot of resistance. But I thought that, you know, okay, the manuals were great and they're really easy, but Pathways is something that is innovative, and I didn't see a problem with it. And I realized that Toastmasters had to really take part in the, you know, the global online learning, or they would be left behind. I understood the reasons for it, and I tried to convince people of it. I have to admit that nowadays I don't really understand why people find it so difficult to navigate, but then I'm used to the internet, so perhaps I'm just missing something there. But I'm very happy to be on this panel. Thank you for asking me, John, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Moira. So that's our panelists this evening. So the format we're going to take is that I'm going to introduce a particular topic or an area of pathways, get some feedback from our panelists. But what I really want is the engagement from the rest of you guys in the audience. For me, Pathways is about three key things for Pathways. Number one, access. Number two, the achievement. And number three, the acknowledgement that we're all working well towards it. So I'm going to start off by thinking about the range of paths that are available and how they differ and how we can choose between them. So we all know, or I think most of us know, that there are 11 pathways to choose from. When looking at our pathways, it's really important to think about what our personal objectives are. I think, like me, many of us started on Pathways by simply ticking a few boxes on a screen, coming up with an answer, and then picking something completely different because it sounded nice. And I think that can present challenges further down the line. But what I'd like to know, perhaps from Fiona, is when you looked at your pathway choice, what did you take into consideration and why?
Good question. I perhaps took a different path as an experienced member because, you know, I'd achieved DTM in the classic program. So I chose my path and answered the questionnaire based on what I wanted for myself personally, for my career and my business. So I took a very, very practical approach. I think if I was a complete newbie coming along to Toastmasters, I would have went down the presentation mastery route, because I feel when people come to Toastmasters, well, certainly when I joined, it was for the public speaking to develop that skill and more confidence in that area, and specifically to do with speaking off the cuff. For me, that was what I wanted. So for me, I was thinking of my own personal development and how this could help me. And maybe that was something a bit challenging. So it was a mix of both. It was, I want a good challenge and I want something that would be useful outside of Toastmasters as well.
Thank you, Fiona. Maria, I saw you nodding feverishly there when Fiona was telling us about her pathways. As an area director and experienced Toastmaster, when people ask you for advice about selecting pathways, what advice would you give them?
Originally, I did as I was told. Pathways came in March, so I had a VPE until I did it a few months later, and I went into base camp and I answered the questions. And I actually chose my first pathway because team collaboration was a goal at work, you know, the big strategy by the company at the time. Many years later, I finally finished it. I felt how many years later. I wouldn't do that now. When I chose my new path around the Christmas break, I made sure I got my path finished by the end of the year. I use my PDR, my PDP at work, and I add Toastmasters certificates to my performance development. And I wanted to finish it. So I finished it and I gave myself the Christmas break and I pulled out this catalogue, which I'm happy to share with you, which basically summarizes all the projects. And you can hop between them, and it's a little bit like the evaluation sheet, you know, that summarizes the project. And I actually went through and I looked at the key level 4s and 5s, etc., and I decided what I wanted in my life next. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what I'll do this year. I wanted a bit of fun. I wanted this, I wanted that. And I looked at visionary communication. I didn't want to do a high performance project. I knew that. I wanted to do some kind of project. I loved the leadership module. I wanted to do something that had the communications one at this time. And I actually just went, don't want that, don't want that, don't want that, looked at what was left and decided, went back and checked again. And I thought, you know, this is something, visionary communication is so innovative. You can do anything. You can apply it to this, apply it to that. And if I do end up doing a different hobby at the end of the year, I can use it. So I sort of chose it that way. And that's what I do with people. I'd have a talk to them and I tell them, these are the projects you have to plan ahead for. Is this something you'd like to do? And then discuss, well, can you apply it to this part of your life or that part? So that's because a lot of people say they made the wrong choice by doing that questionnaire, and they're happy. And if they could understand it again, and I understand it a lot better now, I did it a different way. I was lucky the first one I picked wasn't awful for me, but I'm sure I would have worked my way through it. But I think people need to really understand what the big projects are.
Thank you, Maria. So I think the message there for everybody is, when you're looking at your pathway selection, it's really about what your personal goals and objectives are. And I think, as Maria alluded to them, many of us, when we first set off on our first pathways journeys, as new to everybody, we sort of went through the screen, ticked the boxes and went with the solution that was given us. And I know since then, many of us have reflected on the wider opportunities that are available. Philip, I think you had something you wanted to add to that discussion as well.
Yeah. I'm from Society Toastmasters. We have a couple of dozen members. Precisely 2 of us are deep into pathways. One of them is Zen, and he isn't here, but for obvious reasons, he is engaged in pathways, and I'm the other one. And so I did a little bit of research, it's very limited research of my own, to discover why people were not taking it up. And then I had a look at a range of other clubs and how deep people were getting into pathways. And I found a very similar pattern. And then making some inquiries, I realized that there were two main reasons why people were resisting pathways. And by the way, I'm not complaining about pathways because I like it. And I've completed one, I'm nearly completed the second one, and I'm into the third one. So the 2 main reasons for resistance seem to be that people looking at the programs will come across some of the later assignments and thinking, this is complex, this is something I can't do because they may be extended like 22 minutes, and I can't ask my club to give me that, or I need to engage other people in a project and I don't know where I can find these people. So the resistance is, the first resistance is about the complexity of some of the projects which are coming up in the program. And the other one is that the question of navigation. I think you need to ask yourself, when somebody has completed a phase or a complete path, what are the questions in their minds? And how easy is it to resolve those questions? And the simplest one is, when you complete a project, how do you mark it complete? And it is not intuitive. You cannot easily find, if you know where to go, you know where to click something, then it's easy for you. But if you don't know that, you just look at the thing and say, I'm here now. What's the question in my mind? The question there is, what is next? What do I do next? And there is no simple answer or no simple way of finding that. Now, once you introduce the possibility of a difficulty like that, people will drift away very quickly. Very few people want to have to fight with the project or fight with the process each time. So in the discussion of pathways, a discussion like this about pathways, I think it is vital to address that kind of issue and ask yourself, what are the questions, what are the difficulties that people have in their mind, and how easily can they find that answer without having to call somebody else up?
Thank you, Philip. I think you make two really valid points there, and I think they're points that many of us are aware of. Firstly, the completion of the higher level projects. I think many of us are quite daunted by some of those projects, and I think it's incumbent on the district, the divisions, the areas, and the club leadership to try and find areas where we can facilitate those higher level pathways so that everybody gets a quality of a quality of learning from Pathways and not simply going through the easiest projects to get through the path. And I think it's something certainly something we're going to touch on a little later. Moira, I'd be interested to know from your perspective, what type of challenges do you see some of the perhaps the newer members face when they join and look at the Pathways programme?
I agree with Philip that some of the paths it's quite complex to navigate if you don't know what you're doing. And I don't think that we can sign members up in the clubs and then just abandon them, just leave them. They need some sort of guidance. I don't know what they get from Toastmasters International with their path. I presume there's some sort of link to it, but I think the VPE and perhaps a Pathways champion in each club needs to be on hand to guide them through it, or have some written instructions. Mm-hmm. It's not as easy as the old manuals, but I always thought that, you know, when new members sign up now, they don't have the old manuals to compare it to. So they don't know what they've missed. So this is it. But I have seen some people, and we always think that young people, more younger than me, are very good at navigating the internet, and it'll be fine for them. But it's surprising how many do get confused with Pathways. I always say to people, just follow the instructions. Once you're in the project, just click on these arrows and do what you're told and follow the instructions. And when you get to the part where, you know, it has your icebreaker, and then it has the next project and the next project, and if you just follow these, you will come to the bit that says completion. And the one question that I was always getting asked, because people were emailing me and calling me, they would say, well, you know, it doesn't work. I can't get on to the next bit. And the one thing they always did was the assess your skills before, then they go to the club, deliver their speech, go home. Fortnight later, they're looking to, they're back in trying to do the next speech. They've forgotten the assess your skills after. And that was always the vital part. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think we have to give them some help. We can't just abandon new members and think they're going to get on with it themselves.
I think you're 100% right there, Maura. I think one of the key things about Pathways is that it's like, I look at it like at work. If I'm familiar with a software package at work, everybody thinks I'm an expert. And I think that everybody else should know as much as me. And the reality is quite different. And I think sometimes in Toastmasters, we have that idea that, well, I can do it and I'm not overly bright, so surely everybody else can do it. But that isn't always the case. And I think one of the most important things for me as a club level is that within the club, we should try and find ways that we can support new members, and support members perhaps that feel a little bit reluctant to put the hand up and say, actually, I don't really know what I'm doing. Paul, I was just wondering if, Paul Amani, I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that and the types of things that some of the clubs in your division are doing.
Well, I will say that there's no significant resistance to Pathways in Cork, first of all. Secondly, what I will say is that I'm utterly shocked to hear that there is a club in Toastmasters into which a new person comes in and they're left and abandoned. I cannot imagine that this is so contrary to the guidance that Toastmasters International have given. Every new member should have a mentor. Every new member should have a coach on Pathways. Now, we all know this. We all know it. There are plenty of advanced Toastmasters here. We've read it. Nobody should be left to find their way around Pathways by themselves. Preposterous idea. If it's happened, then serious thought needs to be given by the club president and by the VPE and by the club committee. So I am, in a sense, if somebody comes into a club and they're not helped with getting into the Toastmasters education program, in my humble opinion, they should join another club. Straightforward. They should not hang around in a club where they're not being served, and they should bring that matter to the attention of their area director, and their area director should bring that matter to the attention of their division director. If I heard that that was happening in Cork, I'd go bananas. So you asked me what should I think happen? Well, I think the whole thing is very simple. Pathways is very easy. Everybody's used to Zoom. Now, by the way, I meant what I said at the beginning. If somebody isn't used to handling software and moving between screens and handling pop-ups and all that, let them go on the paper version of Pathways and stop making it difficult for them. The key thing is about education and about personal and professional development. Nobody should be spending their time learning Pathways. What they should be doing is improving their ability to function in the outside world. Pathways serves them. I don't, there've been a number of things asked, but I'll stop because in the interest of giving people a chance to speak. I have very strong feelings about how there is, I mean, I only hear stories about this, but if any of you are in a club that isn't actually inducting a new member properly, then please, please go and have a serious think about it tonight and work on a plan with your committee to change. Open up your moments of truth and run a session. Because seriously, that's a major weakness, which we should be well over by now. Well over. We're well into Pathways. We're, faffing around, having struggles with Pathways is totally unnecessary. If you can't get it in your own club, get it somewhere else. Thanks.
So I think, Paul, to summarise, you think that everybody should be supported in their Toastmasters journey. I think everybody here would agree with that. But I think
it's on the application form, John. There's a promise. If you read the application form, the back of it, you see that Toastmasters International promises that people will be helped.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Paul. So I think there's lots of views there on Pathways and getting onto Pathways. I'd be interested to hear from anybody else in the audience if they've got any experiences or opinions on what they may be doing in their club that's helping new Toastmasters join. Elizabeth, I can see your hand up enthusiastically there.
Of course, my hand is going to go up because I'm a real Pathways enthusiast. I have 7 paths in my portfolio, and I'm my club's Pathways champion. And I'm very proud that I've worked very, very hard to make sure we're 100% we've adopted Pathways. And I think there are 2 things the club has done that I'd like to share. I think they were very, very convinced that we needed a Pathways champion. And that has really worked because what it's done is given the club a focal point. If anyone has a question about Pathways, they can come to the Pathways champion. If she doesn't know what to do, which is, so in my case, it's not a problem because I said I'm working on 7 paths. I'm connected enough around the world to get the information to help them. So you need that contact. What we've also done, we've also got a very strong mentoring culture in our club. So that a new person gets a mentor, they're linked to the Pathways champion. And we've also encouraged everyone this year to try to achieve a Pathways educational goal. So you've got that backup system of the mentoring champion, the mentoring, the Pathways, and now we're forming buddies. And I'll just tell you one last story. One of our members was so keen, she's actually designed a Google Classroom where mentors can link with them. I mean, it is absolutely, it's mind-blowing. And I take Maria's point and Fiona's that I think Pathways can be extremely not only interesting and exciting, but it can really move you on personally and professionally. So those are my 2 points. Get your club a Pathways champion and get a mentoring process in place that integrates the whole thing, and then monitor. Absolutely look at the statistics. Who is doing what? That's my 2 pence worth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I think you raise a good point come out of that. You talked about access, you talked about achievement, and you talked about people working together as a team. And I think you're 100% right. Mentoring is a key aspect of Pathways education program. Without good mentoring and people working together and supporting members, then people will either reach a level and stop, and we see that quite often, or they will not engage at all. They'll feel the challenge is too much. So I think the point that both you and Paul made, particularly about mentoring and Pathways champions working together, are very valid. And I would encourage everybody at club level to look at some of these activities and how you can incorporate that into your club training program and make it happen. Sorry, did I see your hand up, Martin? Did you want to raise
Yes,
a point?
thanks, John. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. I've been doing some work on Pathways. I'm in Phoenix Tara, formerly in Dunbayne when we used to meet. But we're in the happy position. We have 7 new members. So between the president and the VPE, it was agreed that I do a session outside of the club. And I did one last week, but we left it open for the experienced people to come along as well. I used it as the elective for my level 4, the question and answer session. And our president evaluated it, which again made the point to the experienced people how you can get projects done in advance and bank them for when you get as far as them. But in the feedback that I got from in the evaluation, what worked so well, I had 12 or 15 slides, but what they really set value on was when I went onto the website live and did a screenshot and played around and let them ask questions. And the word went out on it, and I'm doing a follow-up tomorrow evening. I have 4 more. So I think it's the little casual sessions outside of the club where people were a lot more relaxed, and we kept it within the hour. That worked well, you know.
That's great, Martin, and that's so intuitive to think about the members and how they're going to react to training sessions. I think far too often we try and build, training and formal training into our club programs, and really the more effective training is where people are relaxed, they feel comfortable to ask questions, they feel comfortable to say, help, I don't understand this. And it's only by working with members at that level, with that level of engagement, that you're going to be able to make the most for everybody and allow everybody to make the most of it. Marion, I can see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm Phoenix Tara Club as well with Martin, and I just want to say that he actually went further than that last year when people were really afraid of Pathways. I described the other day, for me, it was like being in the Ark and being quite happy, not looking out to see how the waters subsided. And suddenly I was projected up to Chris Hadfield up in space when Pathways came. You were totally thrown out of your comfort zone. But at one point, Martin even got people to bring their laptops into the meeting. And he had a special meeting where he helped people to get online and to do the really nitty gritty with helping them to start up, which was invaluable at the time.
Brilliant. That's great, Marion. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to take a couple of more points on joining Pathways and some of the challenges there, if anyone's got any points to make, and then we'll move on to some of the more advanced level Pathways projects and how perhaps we can make them work. Maria, I think, did you have your hand up? Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say the thing about the mentors, and I do like, some of the mentors are great speech mentors. They're great people to guide you through the beginning. But what I found, I had a VPE and president. They were fantastic. They guided their club. They used to share screen. They used to talk through people. They were doing presentation mastery. They had no idea how different some of the other pathways were. They had no idea about doing the project. And they totally missed that. And thankfully, I was at a meeting and told them that. And that's why I've shared that catalogue and John and Pack. I've sent John videos from YouTube with the most recent interface of Basecamp that I could find. So after May last year, any of that might be useful to you. But what you say about champions, the clubs that don't just have a poor overworked VPE, the clubs that get everybody involved are the most successful. You can have a new person who's only gone through a couple of their first level speeches, and they might be used to e-learning. They might find it easy, and they can connect with somebody and show them. They could show a very experienced speaker and have a little Zoom face-to-face during the week. That builds the culture of the club. That builds feedback and a happy club. And it shouldn't be, we must do this. A lot of these people have got day jobs and they're overworked and they think they're doing the right thing. They're trying really hard, but it's sharing the load and everybody understanding and really getting the VPEs trained to understand the differences and not be the only ones doing the ed slots, as I've told them, get everybody. And one simple thing like knowing how to maneuver it as a new person, you might actually be able to help some of the other members. And that's really important as a message, a happy, friendly club where everybody's there, valued, doing something to help other people. And I think the whole culture of Pathways isn't just about the course, it's about how the club supports it and everybody sees.
And building that camaraderie.
Yeah, I think that's really important too.
Excellent. Thank you, Maria. So I think we've talked a lot about how to engage members on Pathways. Hopefully some useful information there, some good ideas. And as I say, if you want to share anything in the chat, please do so. And if we want to get the discussion further, we'll get time later on in the evening. And what I'd like to do now is to move on to something that I find particularly tricky, is looking at the Pathways later projects, some of the levels 4 and level 5 projects in particular, where people, I think, and I've done this, you reach one of those levels where it's about doing a leadership role or planning a panel discussion or a question and answer section, and you're stuck for ideas and how can you make this engaging for the club. So Moira, perhaps you could share some experiences you've had with regards to some of the level 4 and level 5 pathways that you've worked on, or you know other people have worked on in a different, more insightful way.
Well, I've actually completed a path. I did presentation mastery, and it was at the time when Pathways was quite new. So I just really, I didn't do anything very original, I don't think. I'm trying to think of people who did. To be honest, I haven't seen a lot of very advanced paths.
No.
I've mainly been involved with people who have, just starting out.
So what did you do for your level 5 paths? Your level 5 in your last pathway? Can you remember?
Hold on, I'll tell you because I've got my screen here.
You there?
Yep. Oh, right. Sorry, I've just.
Okay, I'm going to share something with everybody now. Something that I found quite enlightening. So a few months ago, I was lucky enough to be involved in a speechcraft project. I didn't take any responsibility for it. I wasn't in charge of it. I didn't have any coordinator responsibility. I just went along for the ride. And what came across to me was the many opportunities when you're working as a group of Toastmasters on projects might look that focus on one person perhaps, or what you on the face of it you see one person seeing the opportunity. But when you actually get into these projects, there's lots of opportunities for us all to learn and develop more skills. In this particular exercise, it was a speechcraft exercise. So of course, the person doing the coordination, the speechcraft coordinator, got the elevated project as speechcraft coordinator. But what I also found was, as being a member of the speechcraft team, it allowed me to take a role as a short-term mentor for one of the people on the course. And I found that particularly rewarding because, different to some of my other mentoring roles in Toastmasters, it was a relatively short-term role. So it was with somebody that I didn't know at all. So they weren't a member of my club or a member of Toastmasters that had a long association with Toastmasters. We had something specific in common. And it gave me an opportunity to practice my mentoring skills in a different environment, which I thought from a Toastmaster perspective was really rewarding. We also did some training sessions for the students on the course. That gave me an opportunity to do some other speech projects outside of my own club, but being evaluated by Toastmasters on things like speechcraft, on some of the, let's say, some of the typical projects that I've done in my CC manual, like speechcraft, body language, vocal variety, and reflecting on some of those skills. So it was an opportunity for me to do that, and some of the other members to do that. And at the end of it, we did a panel discussion for other members that were interested in speechcraft. So somebody facilitated that. So from that one project, there were a number of us who were able to fill other level 4 and level 5 projects from being involved in that one project. I'd be interested to know if anybody else has had any other similar experiences where they've perhaps worked on a project with other Toastmasters, which has been rewarding both in terms of learning something new, but perhaps helping them to progress on their levels in Pathways. Has anybody got any experience or would like to add anything to that comment? Sue.
It's interesting you should say that, John, because that's exactly how the Competent Leader projects worked before. So you would be, say, you might lead a club speech contest, and in there you have various different roles available to different members. So you might have somebody doing a promotional project, you might have somebody organising the meeting, you might have somebody being a team leader within that environment, for example, the chief judge. So in a sense, those skills are there, it's just looking at it in a different way. And if you can apply that thought process, then you can overcome some of those hurdles to help members engage with it in this way. And I had exactly that kind of conversation with somebody today. And when I explained it to them, they said, oh my goodness, I'm really excited now about doing this. So
Excellent.
Yeah,
so thank you, Sue. Thank you for sharing that. I think you make a really good point there, that, you know, Toastmasters for me, and I think for everybody else, is really a lot about, it's about learning and personal development. It's about having fun, of course, we all want to have fun, but I think also it's about fellowship. And it's at the latter stages, or as we progress through our Toastmaster journey and we start getting to that stage where, you know, the learning is important, but it's probably not as important as some of the working together and the fellowship. And if we can combine the two by working on projects together, then I think that's a win-win for everybody. Fiona, I think you had some thoughts on that.
Yes, I did, John, and it wasn't a specific example, but just building on what Sue had mentioned there, and people used to speak of before, talking about never giving a free speech in Toastmasters. And it's the same idea here in terms of always, if you're doing a speech, try and match it to one of the projects. Similarly, if you're doing a leadership role, where can it fit in your Pathways program? And for me, as we're having this discussion tonight, what's really clear is that if we all do the basics, the Toastmasters basics that we did with the classic program, and we do it right now, our members will have a good outcome. They will have a good result. And for me, Pathways just happens to be something else, but any challenges we're having, there is much around doing the basics correctly in Toastmasters. And, you know, talking about, you know, Elizabeth was talking about the Pathways Champion, and that's absolutely very useful as our members build up this knowledge. But all of these things, this is about having a really good club, having a good VPE, having good membership, the fellowship piece that you talk about as well. It's all of that. My overwhelming view on this is, if you have a good club doing all the basics correctly, people will have a good experience on Pathway. They'll have the support they need if they come across something that's challenging. They have a network of people to ask if they get stuck and don't know what to do. I know Carmel has reached out there in terms of for VPL you know, or HPL rather, not VPL at the moment. So I think this is about do the basics correctly. If people aren't doing pathways, then I think they're possibly not doing the basics correctly, and reach out to other members to help with it.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. I think, again, I think those are some really important points. And I think that sort of pulls together everything that we've talked about this evening. And I think one of the points somebody made in the chat there to me was that we have to recognise that people are coming at this from different levels. So we get some members that are in Toastmasters for the absolute maximum learning opportunity, and we should be able to encourage those members to continue on their pathways and show them the windows of opportunity in some of those higher level pathways. I think the other important thing is to think about the pathways that you're doing. And one of the things that I wanted to also touch on was, as we finish our first pathway and move on to our second pathway, what are the types of things that we might consider a little bit differently? And I know, Maria, you've done a lot of work on pathways. I'd be interested to get your perspective on what you see as some of the core differences in some of the pathways. Maria.
Yeah, can I screen share? I think that's easiest, because I'm going to send everybody a couple of things. I think I'm getting some offline questions as well. If I can screen share, I'm going to put the document up that I showed. Okay, I was just reading about high performance leadership, just to answer Kamal's question. And I don't think people realise you don't just go and do another speech at a club. She has got a lot of stuff to go through with the guidance committee. I personally would go to the vision plan first. Look, maybe do a SWOT analysis of your club, look at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, get your members involved, do an education slot, find out what drives your club, what does your club need, and maybe build a vision around that and a project around that, and see who is passionate to lead it. But in terms of answering John's question, let's look at this. So I started doing an enhanced pathways, and I stole the name of John. This was for club officer training, the week before district officer training, and pulled out all level 4s and 5s, put them into the pathways, and some of them were electives in other pathways. And if you chose that, I think if you read your 4s and 5s and maybe your 3 mandatories, you got a better idea of what it was about. I also, this is the catalogue I want to share with you. Now, this is a similar one, used to be on district, Easy Speak 2 years ago. District 57 has this on their website. It has the new pathways mentoring. A lot of people don't even realize that's on Basecamp. Nothing to do with the actual 11 pathways. Once you finish level 2 of your pathway, you go back to the home page, and right at the very bottom in small writing, you can do a separate mentoring program. And really all your mentors should try and do it, but it's a separate program. So, and then there's DTM on the pathway. So if I went through, and I've almost forgotten your question, John.
So I think what you're saying, Maria, is
Yeah,
I think
so I would go through and I would read and I would click and I would say, okay, what is motivate others about? I'll have to tell you what I did for that, because I think it was unique and fun. We did a table topic social to welcome a new club into our area. And in the end, I bribed them with money to get as many members from all 4 clubs, and they were all in competition with each other. And it was completely set to the project that set the night up. And it was fabulous. But sorry, I'm talking too much.
Thank you, Maria. You're not talking too much. I'm just conscious of time. So I think the point you were making there quite clearly is that when we're looking at, particularly on our second and third pathways, really focus on what the latter levels are. One thing I would like to add, and this is for everybody, I think, when I first looked at pathways, I had already completed my CC and a couple of my advanced manuals, and I felt that I was going backwards when I was going back to the icebreaker. But I want to tell everybody that is not the reality of it. The reality is that if you look at those projects, and I know many people think, oh, I've got to revisit the icebreaker, I've got to revisit some of these projects. That is a real challenge. It's a real challenge to think about how from your first pathway or your first icebreaker, how you have learned more and developed more to make your subsequent projects so much more engaging. We've only got a couple of minutes left before we're out of time. So I'd like to open the floor to anybody who's got any quick comments, just a couple of comments, just to summarize where we are and how they feel about Pathways. I will leave the room open for a further 15 minutes after we finish the formal part of the exercise. But any questions, any comments, anybody? Brenda.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll come back to you in a minute, Philip. Brenda.
Yeah, hi, thanks, John. I just observed from most of the speakers there, particularly the four that you introduced at the beginning, that they're highly motivated and enthusiastic about these pathways. I personally am not, and I was hoping for, you know, to gain some insight around how to use it a bit more. But for those who find it easy, you know, it's easy, but that is not helpful to, and obviously because this is being held and by the comments there and by the open I'm in myself, I think there are many, many members who are struggling with Pathways, many members.
Brenda,
and I would think that would come up here rather than the promotion of it as it stands for those who find it easy and welcoming.
Brenda, I think you make a valid point for a very large group of members. I think it's really important that as leaders of the district and the division and areas that we engage with all the membership, not just to talk about why we enjoy Pathways, but what we think is what we like about Pathways, but always also to try and understand perhaps some of the challenges that people like yourself feel, some of the obstacles that you know, some of the negativity you feel about.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping that this is what would come up, so as I could gain a little bit. And so what I heard, I think it was Moira earlier on saying, you know, you just have to follow the steps. I disagree entirely with that. I find it's no more than the layers of an onion. You know, you press one button and it takes you off on one course, and you're trying to get to another course. I personally, I'm no IT expert. I put my hands up, but I'm not, you know, I don't have a problem either with IT, but I find the layering and the trying to, I have spent hours trying to find a basic.
Trying to work through it. Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to take up any more time, but
no,
just,
Brenda,
it's only fair to bring that side to it as well, because there are many, many of us in my boat.
100%, Brenda. I think my takeaway from those comments in particular are that we need to do more to make sure that everybody has access to Pathways.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair
to
pick out any club and say, you know, you need more mentors, or you need. I think
I agree 100%.
Give me your internet browser. Try a different internet browser. If you use
Maria, I think we can talk about this later on because we're at the end of it. But Brenda, thank you very much for your comments, and I will be in touch directly to see if we can follow up and understand some of the challenges that we can incorporate from division to try and help people in that area. Sorry, Philip, I think you had something you wanted to
well, it's totally related to what Brenda was saying. It's a very simple question. Where does a member go to find out more about Pathways?
Okay, so where does a member go to find out more about Pathways? That responsibility at D71 lies with me. So I will make sure that my email is available and that I can then direct people and help them, support them getting onto Pathways and going through some of the Pathways challenges that I think Brenda alluded to. Not just the projects themselves, but some of the practicalities on access. Sorry, Fergus, would you like to have one final comment?
Thank you, Fergus from Thomond Toastmasters in Limerick. Like Brenda, I would agree totally with her, and I was exactly like her up till last week, when I was highly motivated by my president, Liam, who is here somewhere. This week, I'm taking the devil by the tail and I'm pressing buttons and I'm exploring it. I'm going forward just totally differently. I'm going to make mistakes, I don't care. I'm going to try things and I'm going with it. Already in 1 week, I have learned a number of things. I have learned things that I didn't know after 20 years in Toastmasters. And it's the way forward. I'm just going to do it and I'm not afraid of it. I wonder, just, has anyone been sacked for that mess they made of the programming? Because
no, but yeah,
like, or has anything been done to try and improve it?
Well, I think
backwards and forwards between sites is just horrific.
Yeah. Fergus, I think many of us share your frustrations with some of the transition periods. So I'm not going to try and make promises and reasons why, but it is. I can tell you that that Toastmasters Pathways is the sole education program, and they continue to develop it. I think everybody's seen in the last 12, 18 months some real positive steps. I'm not saying that we're at the ultimate best solution, but we are, Toastmasters are working towards it. And I think if we all work together and support each other, then we can get through some of those challenges. I am conscious of time. It's now 8:05, so I'm running late. That'll be another bad mark for me in my role as Pathways Chair. I'd like to conclude by saying thank you very much to everybody, and especially to the 4 guys who sat on our panel this evening. Thank you for everybody who contributed. As I say, I will be hanging around for another 15-20 minutes or so please feel free to stay online. In the meantime, if anybody leaves, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to be your host this evening, and thank you for sharing with me. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Just before we all rush off, I'd like to thank John and the team. I know Pathways is not an easy thing to explain and to discuss, but there were some really good ideas that came out of that, and certainly ones that I'm going to be taking back to my club. So thank you very much for that. Just before you go, and I won't take up more than a minute of your time, I just want to announce that there is some more training available over the next week. On Friday at 7, there is a training session with John Cox, who's the immediate past director, division director, district director, and he's going to talk about growing membership, how to grow club membership. So that's 7 o'clock on Friday. Any of you, if you're officers and have got members, officers who still need to be trained, we have got a catch-up COT on Saturday morning. So please advise them to go to that if you need that extra member to be trained. And then next Tuesday, we have got Patricia O'Reilly, again, former past district director, who is going to lead a training session on how we prepare for next year's Toastmasters, running elections and so on. Once again, thank you to John and the team, and thank you all very much for coming tonight. And I look forward to seeing you over the next few training sessions. Thank you.
Care everyone.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, is the training that you've just mentioned, Danny, is all that training on the same link as we are now, or where do we find that info?
No, if you go to the district website calendar, all the training is there.
Okay, no problem.
Just log on to it there.
I can share a link if you give me a second.
Okay, thank you.
And Daniel's just going to put it up in the chat.
I've already done it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you,
I'll just
Sue.
take a screenshot of that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Janine, I know you had a question earlier on about changing pathways up to 30 days after you've selected it.
Yes.
Does anybody know the answer to that? Janine, do you want to just repeat the question? Because I'm sure somebody here will be able to help you.
Thanks, John. So my question was, if you've selected a pathway, because someone selected a free pathway, they have now decided that they want to change that pathway. And my understanding is that you've got 30 days. There's a little window of 30 days, but that's as far as I know. I wouldn't know exactly how that person would change their pathways on Toastmasters.org.
90 days, not 30.
Moira.
I think all you do is contact them.
So would you email them?
Sorry, email them, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I was going to say, if you email them and put a compelling argument as to why you're doing it after a month, they're usually quite good at letting you choose another path.
Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth.
John, can I ask a question?
Oh, sure.
John, just now we try and avoid mentioning the old CC manual. It's history. But in the CC manual, you had your book, you had your pages. The book was incomplete until you got the evaluator to fill in the page, and we were all obsessed about that. It was lovely having the page and the evaluator give it back to you. There isn't the same check, I suppose, on the evaluation sheets. And if they're not, would anyone have any idea? Like, after much of throwing it around, we have firmly put the responsibility on the speaker. Download the sheet, send it to your evaluator. You keep after the evaluator until they send it back. But you know, there isn't that. It isn't the same as the little compact book. Does anyone have any idea on the evaluation pages?
I think Fiona does. I saw her nodding there.
Thank you, Fiona.
I hear you on this, Martin, and I agree. It is the responsibility of the speaker and person to produce the material and give it to the evaluator. But the idea, we're online at the moment, so it's a bit different. But when we had meetings, it was printed out. I print out my projects. I've got a file here. I still print them out. I like the hard copy. I hand it to the person. They scan it and send it back to me, or just hand it back to me at the end of the evening. I think it's possible to stay a little bit old school on that. And I think people, online might need a bit of a nudge, but I think that works. I don't think we have to do it another way if that way works.
Maria, did you want to add something to that?
I was thinking more, I thought you were thinking of the tick-off process, because our VPEs wouldn't even accept it on EasySpeak if they, until you've had your evaluation, you haven't finished your speech, you can't credit your speech. So they wouldn't record it as a done project. But there's somebody, club officer training 6 months ago, somebody was a guest from America or somewhere and sent a link to do one. Some people couldn't use the PDF, so they sent a link that somebody had built somewhere in Toastmasters in the world where you could type everything up and it came back as an evaluation sheet. He had all of Pathways in there. I don't know if anyone kept that link.
No.
Useful at the moment,
but
people are struggling to do it off the PDFs.
The present one is not. I've done 2 evaluations recently, and the one I downloaded off the one that was sent to me and I downloaded is you can print in it. So the one on the TI website is printable.
Typable.
It will take a print. Yeah. That's what I've found.
Well, that's the other thing. People don't have
typable.
We have people can't be VPEs because they can't get the agendas printed, and then you have to ask other people to do it. And I think some clubs should pay for that. But the same thing, if a member wants to bring an evaluation sheet, TMI's website has every evaluation on there. So you can go out there and you can download it. If you know you're doing a speech for a certain thing, you can just bring it along and have it ready. But it is supposed to be the responsibility of that person. If that person hasn't got a printer, how do they bring an evaluation sheet to the meeting?
Can I have a comment on that, Martin?
Yeah. Who's speaking?
So my view is that Toastmasters educational program is about your own self worth and about your own self-development, and you get out of the learning experience what you put into the learning experience. And I know some Toastmasters do speeches, they get the verbal evaluation and they're happy with that. Some Toastmasters really thrive on having the written evaluation in a file that they can refer to back at a later date. Now, of course, there are rules and guidelines in place that we should all comply with, but the reality is that whatever level you achieve in Toastmasters, the person it's worth the most to is you as an individual, and you make it worth it to you, or it's not worth to you. I don't look at Toastmasters and say, oh, look at that particular person, they've done 3 or 4 level 5s, they've got, you know, they've done 4 pathways in the last 6 months, they must be fantastic speakers. I look at myself and say, when I look at my achievements in my pathways, have I gotten out of that a learning and development experience? If I haven't, then it can't be worth very much to me, and I don't expect it to be worth very much to anybody else. I think it is a challenge. I think clubs should encourage everybody to do the written evaluation, because that's the rules, and they should try and facilitate it. I know some clubs, the VPE will send out if they're only doing 3 speeches a night, so they will take it on themselves to send out the evaluation form on behalf of the speaker. Other clubs insist that the speaker provides the evaluation before they complete the entry on Easy Speak. I think what we should be doing is encouraging every member to get the best out of their education program, to make it worthwhile to them. At the end of the day, they're paying for it.
Yeah, what I do at Northampton is to just, as we come up to a meeting, just to do a set of pre-meeting checks to see if everyone's ready to go. And part of that is I just prompt them to make sure they've got the evaluation form to hand, and if they haven't, I email it back by return.
Yeah, and I think all the forms are readily available now. They're available either on your own pathway at Basecamp, or available to anybody to download anyway. So there's no excuse for not having the form. There's only your own self-worth and learning experience that determines how far you go with it. But I do agree. I do think
there's a tab inside Basecamp where you can get all the evaluation resources.
Yeah,
I've just put the Toastmasters.org link in there as well, so you can get them straight off Toastmasters.org as well.
Oh, thanks, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
Thanks, John. I started a hornet's nest there, but I suppose I'm thinking of it in the context of the new members and getting them started as.
And I think
continue as start as you mean to continue. Or
exactly, and I think people follow by experience, and I found this in many clubs, because I think we all know that clubs have different personalities, and it comes from what people see and what they learn. So if they see good practice on day one, and they see the members talking about their evaluation forms, talking about, or the evaluators asking for the evaluation forms, that becomes custom and practice, and they will start to get a much better quality of engagement and learning from it. If
the new members aren't the ones who are having the problems.
Sorry?
The new members aren't the problem. The biggest problem are the old members who are resisting Pathways because they keep comparing it to the old program.
Yeah, and I agree, and this is why we should be making sure that every opportunity is in place and people are encouraged and pushed to following the guidelines correctly and making sure the evaluations are filled in. But that can only come by practice and reinforcing the routine. Well, I've not killed the conversation there, have I?
Maybe I should send that video.
Answer your other question.
Someone who was in that mindset and changed their mind completely, and I asked her to record. I recorded her reflect on your speech after she did it, because she was a person who nearly quit her club, and she was a DTM because she didn't want to Pathways. By the end, she's now let me record it so I can send it to my whole area, remind them they've got their free pathway, and say, this is what she got out of it. It's really
like a converted non-smoker.
Honestly, it was fantastic. It was reflect on your path, the final speech after level 5, and it was brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm going to send it round.
Thank you. Finbar, did you have some? Is it Finbar? Is that correct? Yeah. Have I pronounced it correctly?
Yeah, thank you, John. Just a quick add-on there. I think generally what I found about Pathways that it kind of stretches you more. It stretched me more anyway. Like recently I did a project on speaking before a difficult audience, and that definitely stretched me more. And you know, I took it wasn't too serious a project, and like there was a lot of enjoyment within the club as well that we got out of it. I come from Talking Heads Club in East Cork, and we've very strong membership there at the moment. I do take the point that I think Brenda, Philip and Fergus made that, from Limerick made that, you know, that that there is a bit of a challenge at times getting people to, you know, to use the site. What I said to people is to use the drop-down menus as much as possible to kind of keep scouting around this site. I think you have to kind of just dive in. That's what I did, and I kind of kept moving, as Fergus said, move the arrows left and right. And I said to them, look, you can't really break this thing. Just go in and enjoy it. And, you know, I'm doing presentation mastery. I've registered for motivational strategies. But I think there's a lot of positives with Pathways. But I do believe, and I say this with a hand on heart, that that TI should look at tweaking the site a little bit to make it just simplify things, make it a little bit more simple.
I think the thing, Finbar, is that the Pathway site itself is it's not a third party. It's a program that's been developed for online learning. It's a company that run online learning software. So although Toastmasters own the Pathways program, the actual interface and the way it works is through another party. So I think everything, as Toastmasters start to realise the opportunities for improvement, then it's not simply a case of, oh, send TMI an idea and they can incorporate it next week. There is a process that has to go through to do that. Elizabeth, I think you know some more about that.
I was going to say to Finbar and the others that in fact they do listen. It does take a long time. But when we first started Pathways, if you recall, you couldn't move through the levels. You had to finish a level before you could see the other level. But because people campaigned and they did change that, and they've changed the base camp. So I would say all these things you're saying, keep them. We keep writing to Toastmasters, telling them how to improve, and eventually they will listen. If enough people say the same thing, they listen. But I have to say they do listen. It's a bit slow, but they have made some major improvements, I would say. The system was so frustrating 3 years ago, and now it's reasonable, I would say.
I think it's a continuous improvement, like me. Absolutely. It's a continuous improvement. Danny, have you got your hand up, or is it just a squat on the screen?
No, it's just a spot on the screen.
Oh, sorry.
John, I have to go, and thanks for a great session.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you, Martin. All I would say about Pathways is that I was VPE at Leicester 4 years ago when it was the legacy system, and I'm VPE now. And as I was saying to you, John, when we had a conversation the other week, I think there are far more people getting through far more speeches now than there ever were under the old competent communicator. I mean, how many people got to CC? I can think in my time associated with Leicester, and I don't think we're an unusual, we're not unusually bad, but I can think of perhaps 8, 9 people in the last few years of the legacy that got a competent communicator. Yet now we're getting people who are doing level 5s, and doing such a variety of different things. It's not just speeches,
100%, Danny. I think people are finding real opportunities to, and I think one of the things that we sometimes forget about Pathways is the information that's available when you go through some of these projects to actually learn something that you don't readily have access to. I know in my career, I've used some of the things that I've learned on Pathways in my professional life, to for the well-being of myself, my job, and my co-workers. So I think one of the things that we don't always reflect on as heavily as we should or we could is what you can actually learn by following the e-learning programs. You know, some of the forms, some of the evaluation. I think someone mentioned earlier about 360 evaluation. That's something that I would never have done in my career, that now I do on a fairly regular basis. When we look at a project, I always look for 360 evaluation, and that's only come about because of following some of the projects on Pathways. If somebody had stood up in front of me and said it'd be a great idea to do a 360 evaluation, I think I would have probably just sort of shook my head and moved on. But because I've been engaged on the project, I've learned from it and taken it on board and adapted it to suit my myself at work as well.